and he has fought for meaningful Medicare prescription drug benefits for all seniors. He has championed public education causes throughout his career. And next year, we have an opportunity on November 6, 2012, to return Senator Bill Nelson to the United States Senate. Please welcome Senator Nelson.
Good morning. I'm a product of public education. Melbourne Elementary, Melbourne Junior High School, Melbourne High School. I won't tell you what class. I will tell you that 35 years after her old man, my daughter was at Melbourne High School as the student body president as well, class of '95. President Andy, you do the Lord's work. You do the Lord's work. It's a great honor for me to come before the people that do the Lord's work. This is an organization that has been setting the standard for excellence ever since 1886. And even when its members now are sometimes confronted by a hostile governor and a hostile legislature. And I want to talk to you about the many ways that we have mutual concerns and mutual goals. One of them is the federal jobs bill for teachers, for firefighters, law enforcement. Or when it comes to renewing No Child Left Behind, we're trying to ensure that Washington's role in overseeing local public schools, while not backing away from reforms aimed at getting kids ready for college and career, we're trying to see that Washington's role is reduced in overseeing local public schools. And the fact is that you all have inspired me over a lifetime of public service to always try to stand up for public education. And so many of us, like the vice president that spoke to you yesterday, and I, are products of that public education. Back when the vice president was in the Senate, he and I argued that we should have applied the government surplus to education funding instead of utilizing the Bush tax cuts. We still do. And I'm happy to say that we worked on trying to get millions in federal funding to bring high-speed internet wireless into Florida's classrooms. And I think most of you here today already know there are a lot of people that support public education, but we are up against a situation where the constant answer, whatever it is to try to get the deal done, is no. And you can't do a deal if somebody won't deal. How many times have folks called you in the last few weeks and months wanting to know what's happening to the jobs bill? Well, actions often speak louder than words. You saw who voted for it. And unfortunately, the Republicans in the Senate blocked it. And then when Senator Reid stripped out just a portion of it that any poll in America tells you overwhelmingly that they supported, which was teachers and firefighters and law enforcement, and tried to get that, we got a majority in the Senate because all the Democrats, and there were 2 Republicans that voted for it, but we couldn't get enough Republicans to get us over the 60-vote threshold to break the filibuster and cut off the debate. It would have produced a lot of jobs. And what it would have been done is to put money into roads and bridges and sewer plants and things that have been crumbling. And it also put money into research and development and money into education. And the Vice President told you all about that yesterday. And there are things that we've got to do that are in that jobs bill in order to compete in a global economy. And by the way, if we're going to compete in a global economy, sometimes we can't ever beat the competition on their low wages, but where we win in the global marketplace is our Yankee ingenuity, our ability to create, our ability to invent. And that means we have to have an educated populace. So we're going to continue to try to get the small chunks of the legislation through, but you see what's happened when Senator Reid pulled off a part of it. The jobs and the economy is on everybody's mind, and rightly so. But right now I want to talk about something else that's important, something that just happened to one of your own. The teacher who heads up the New Smyrna Beach High School's Student Government Association. Have you heard of this? It was nothing new for this teacher, Jill Cicerelli, to be prepping her 17-year-olds for the privileges and responsibility of voting in a democracy. And just as it isn't anything new for any of you all that you do every day when you teach civics. But it turns out that what Jill did was organize a drive at the start of the school year to get her students pre-registered to vote. And doing what she's done for several years, she ran afoul of Florida's new law. Now she could face hefty fines. And for what? For helping students register to vote. I met with Jill last week and some of those students, and it's no surprise that they're not happy with this new voting law. And interestingly, neither is their elected supervisor of elections, who under the law was required to report them to the state authorities. And still, the Volusia County Supervisor of Elections, Ann McFall, has openly criticized the law as egregious and unenforceable. And among many things that it does, Florida's new election law requires third parties who sign up new voters. First of all, they have to go register with the state to sign up folks, and then they have to submit the applications within 48 hours to the Supervisor of Elections. Now, mind you, for 4 decades, the Florida law has been that you had 15 days to turn in the names to the supervisor. They've constricted it to 48 hours. And after this fiasco with Jill, can anyone actually say that with a straight face that we're not taking a step backwards in Florida, especially when it comes to protecting one of our most fundamental rights, the right to vote. And wouldn't you think, in a state like ours, after we went through that debacle in the presidential election of 2000, when finally the legislature woke up and decided to make it easier to vote, to make it easier to register to vote, and to have the assurance that your vote was going to count as you intended it to. After that 2000 debacle, then now the legislature has reversed the process. And I hope that every Floridian, regardless of political party, will stop and examine Jill Ciccarelli's case and this controversial law that has been applied to her. I hope that everyone will realize that this is not happening just in Florida, but in 13 other states. It's a concerted effort. The worst law of the 14 states is Florida. But that's what they have done, a concerted effort to pass laws that will constrict it, and it boils down to two words: voter suppression. Now, I'm not here to assail Republicans. I'm here to argue common sense. I'm here to argue that this is what a democracy is all about, the right to vote. It's time, and you've heard me say this over and over, and what my life is about is bipartisanship and trying to bring people together to build consensus and get people out of their ideological rigidity and to try to do what's best for this country and this state, to find common ground, and as the good book says, come let us reason together. Whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, whether you belong to the Tea Party or have camped out on Wall Street, it's time for us to come together. It's one of those things I admire most about someone like Jill Ciccarelli. She's teaching our kids that democracy is not a spectator sport. Democracy is something that you got to get into. And like Andy Ford, she's not standing in line, she's standing in the front line. And so no one should sit back and watch as a handful of partisan lawmakers continue to block voters' paths to the poll. And what did they do? They made it harder to vote. They made it harder to register to vote. And they made it harder to have your vote counted. You think back a few decades, remember what President Lyndon Johnson had to do. There were poll taxes. There were literacy tests to keep people from voting. And of course, they were trying to block African Americans from voting. And the president went on TV and he spoke to the nation about passing civil rights laws for African Americans, including the right to vote. And he told us, he said, we are going to give them that right. Well, I wonder what President Johnson would think today, watching these legislatures across the country that what the Miami Herald recently called the disturbing trend have passed laws that place unnecessary hurdles between the voting booth and minorities, young voters, and seniors. And this so-called election reform bill rapidly made its way through the Florida legislature this past spring and then was signed into law by Governor Scott despite the public outcry. And you know what it does. How about the part that after the 2000 election, they decided to make it easier to vote, especially for senior citizens. So they created early voting. And they made early voting go a full 14 days. You know what these guys did? They constricted it back to 8 days under the guise that, oh, the voting hours are the same because we're giving the supervisors the right to expand the voting hours. But you know what? When they expand the voting hours, the supervisors have to pay overtime, time and a half. And they don't have budgets that'll support that. So it is now constricted from 14 to 8 days, much to the discomfiture of a lot of senior citizens. And oh, by the way, guess what else they did in the constricting of it? We'd always had early voting all the way up through, including Sunday before the Tuesday election. But now they've cut out that Sunday. They've stopped it on the Saturday before the Tuesday election because why? Guess who goes and votes in record numbers after church on the Sunday before the Tuesday election? And oh, by the way, what else did they do? Amen, brother. They said that, okay, just what caught Jill Cicerelli. We're gonna make you have to register with the authorities before you go out and register voters, and then you got to turn it in within 48 hours. And you know what? You're going to be subject, if you miss 48 hours, you're going to be subject up to a $1,000 fine. That's what Jill's facing. Potentially, that's what those students are facing. And also, the League of Women Voters, which has been registering people in this state for 72 years, has stopped because they're not going to take that kind of financial problem and put that burden on their people. And oh, by the way, you know what else it did? Well, if you happen to move, and you happen to move to another county, and you register to vote, and you show up to vote on election day, oh, let me see your driver's license. And what about it? The driver's license was issued when you lived back at the old address. You're going to get a provisional ballot. This is the new Florida law, a provisional ballot. And all you have to do is look to the record of the 2008 presidential election, and 1/2 of the provisional ballots were not counted. Now, guess who is affected? You remember all of those young people that voted for the first time in college? They go to their university, they suddenly get interested in politics and government. They register to vote in the town where they go to school, and come election day, they go down there to vote, and they're going to get a provisional ballot because their driver's license has their parents' home address on it. This is the nonsense that is going on. Look what the Orlando Sentinel said. It amounts to ripping apart election laws and weakening democracy. Look what the Tampa Tribune said. This bill isn't fooling anybody. It's not about clean elections. Look what the Florida Today newspaper said. It's an assault on the rights that are most cherished of American rights. Governor Scott did not listen then. He's not listening now. And so hear us when we say that no state should have the right to make a law if it abridges people's basic rights. Governor, hear us when we say, take back this law. After being arrested for casting an illegal vote in the presidential election back in 1872, Susan B. Anthony, a school teacher, called it a downright mockery to talk to women of their enjoyment of the blessings of liberty while they are denied the use of the only means of securing them, the ballot. That's Susan B. Anthony. That's what Florida's new election law is, a downright mockery. And listen to the words of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, Jr. He once warned that all types of conniving methods can be used to keep people from becoming registered voters. The denial of this sacred right, Dr. King said, is a tragic betrayal of the highest mandates of our democratic traditions and is democracy turned upside down. That's what Florida's new election law is. It's democracy turned upside down, because democracy is not a spectator sport. Every teacher, every citizen should contact the governor and the legislature and ask them to look beyond their partisan differences and give the people back every means of the right to vote. The right to vote is a power that is supposed to belong to the people. Ladies and gentlemen, it's up to us. Thank you, and God bless you.